In the glittering halls of Topkapi Palace, beneath domes painted with golden calligraphy, and amid the whisper of silks that trailed through corridors scented with rose water, a boy once walked destined to inherit the greatest empire of his age. His name was Murad, son of Selim II, grandson of Suleiman the Magnificent, heir to a dynasty that stretched across 3 continents. But greatness, as history teaches us, is not merely inherited. Murad III, 1546 to 1595, would rule the Ottoman Empire at its zenith of wealth and splendor, yet also preside over its creeping shadows, corruption, intrigue, and the silent power of the harem. His reign, 1574 to 1595, was one of dazzling conquests and bitter costs, of poetry and paranoia, of a man torn between duty and desire. This is the saga of Murad III, the Sultan of Silk and Sorrow. Murad was born in Manisa in 1546, the beloved son of Qasid Selim, who would later be crowned Selim II, and his Venetian-born consort, Nurbanu Sultan. Nurbanu herself was a force of nature, a woman of foreign origin who rose to power in the Ottoman court and would become one of the most influential figures of the Sultanate of Women, that extraordinary age when mothers and wives of sultans shaped imperial politics from behind lattice screens. As a child, Murad was educated in the rigorous Ottoman tradition. He memorized the Quran, studied Persian poetry, learned history, astronomy, and calligraphy, and was trained in archery and horsemanship. But he was not like his grandfather Suleiman, the warrior poet who rode at the head of armies. Murad had a gentler nature. Chroniclers described him as introspective, prone to melancholy, deeply religious, and gifted in literature. He wrote poems under the pen name Muradi, his verses filled with longing and sorrow. Yet Ottoman princes did not live in innocence for long. The law of fratricide established by Mehmed the Conqueror dictated that brothers could be killed to prevent civil war. Murad grew up in a palace where every smile from a sibling could hide a rival's ambition. It was a childhood of silks and swords, lullabies and shadows. When Selim II died suddenly in 1574, Murad, at only 28 years old, ascended the throne. His enthronement was drenched in both triumph and blood. As Ottoman custom dictated, Murad ordered the execution of his 5 younger brothers, strangled with silk cords in the palace, a grim tradition meant to prevent succession disputes. The empire he inherited was immense. From the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia, from the Black Sea to the Maghreb, trade flowed into Istanbul like lifeblood. Caravans brought silk from Persia, spices from India, and furs from Russia. Galleys patrolled the Mediterranean. Tribute poured in from subject peoples. The Ottoman court gleamed with wealth unmatched in Europe. But beneath the grandeur lurked problems. Corruption in the bureaucracy, rebellious janissaries, and mounting costs of war. No story of Murad III is complete without speaking of the women who defined his reign. His mother, Nurbanu Sultan, wielded immense power as Valide Sultan, Queen Mother. A Venetian by birth, born Cecilia Venere Baffo, some sources claim, she kept close ties with Venice, ensuring that her homeland benefited from Ottoman protection and trade. Nurbanu effectively governed alongside her son, and foreign ambassadors often wrote that the true ruler of the Ottoman Empire was she. In the harem, Murad's affections turned to Seyfi Sultan, an Albanian-born beauty who became his chief consort. She was clever, politically astute, and ambitious. Together they had a son, Mehmed III, who would one day ascend the throne. Safi would later dominate the empire as Valid Sultan after Murad's death. But even during his reign, she shaped politics, cultivated alliances with England's Elizabeth I, and corresponded with foreign courts. Yet the harem was also Murad's greatest weakness. Chroniclers tell us he fathered over 100 children with concubines, so many that the treasury strained under the cost of maintaining them. The image of the Sultan, isolated among women, poets, and astrologers, gave ammunition to critics who accused him of neglecting the battlefield for the pleasures of the palace. Despite his personal retreat into the palace, Murad's reign was far from peaceful. 1. The Ottoman-Safavid War 1578-1590. Murad's armies clashed with the Safavids of Persia in a brutal 12-year war. The Ottomans triumphed, capturing vast territories in the Caucasus, including Tiflis, Tbilisi, and Shirvan. The Treaty of Constantinople, 1590, left the empire at its largest territorial extent in the east. Yet the war drained the treasury and cost tens of thousands of lives. 2. The Long Turkish War 1593-1606. Towards the end of Murad's reign, tensions with the Habsburgs erupted into the so-called Long Turkish War. Though Murad himself never led armies into the field, his generals fought bloody campaigns along the Hungarian frontier. The Janissaries grew restless, demanding higher pay, and corruption spread through the military ranks. 3. Naval power in the Mediterranean. The Ottoman fleet continued to dominate the Mediterranean, though Venice, Spain, and Portugal pushed back. Trade routes to the Red Sea and Indian Ocean remained vital, with the Ottomans competing fiercely against Portuguese expansion. Murad was deeply religious and mystical in temperament. He surrounded himself with Sufi scholars and astrologers, consulting them before major decisions. Chroniclers note his belief in dreams and omens, and his tendency to delay decisions until the stars were favorable. One famous figure at his court was Hoca Saadettin Effendi, a historian and theologian who tutored Murad and became his trusted advisor. Under his guidance, Murad promoted Islamic scholarship and commissioned works of history and theology. But critics accused him of indecision, of retreating too often into prayer and mysticism, while leaving the empire as pressing problems to corrupt officials. Though the empire expanded under Murad, the seeds of decline were sown. Inflation ravaged the economy, fueled by the flood of silver from the New World into Europe. Corruption spread through the bureaucracy as positions were sold rather than earned. The Janissaries, once an elite fighting force, became unruly, demanding bribes and interfering in politics. Murad's isolation within the harem, his indulgence in poetry and astrology, and his neglect of the field contrasted sharply with his grandfather Suleiman's martial vigor. Yet one must not mistake Murad for weak. His policies strengthened ties with England, Venice, and France, and his cultural patronage enriched Ottoman art and literature. Still, the cracks in the empire were widening. On January 16, 1595, Murad III died in Topkapi Palace, aged 49. He had reigned for 21 years. His death was kept secret at first, while his son, Mehmed III, was brought from the harem to assume the throne. Mehmed, following grim tradition, executed 19 of his brothers to secure his rule, one of the bloodiest acts in Ottoman history. Murad was buried in a grand mausoleum in Hagia Sophia. alongside dozens of his children. The poets who had once sung of his gentle spirit now mourned him as a ruler torn between duty and desire, faith and politics, love and empire. Murad III remains one of the most fascinating Ottoman sultans. He presided over the empire's greatest territorial extent in the east. His reign was marked by splendid cultural achievements, from poetry to architecture. His rule also revealed the growing power of the harem and the sultanate of women, as Nurbanu and Safi shaped imperial politics. Yet he is remembered as much for his retreat into mysticism and indulgence as for his victories. To some, he was the poet king, a man of faith and literature. To others, he was the sultan who let the empire slide into corruption, while he fathered children and gazed at the stars. And so Murad III's story is not of conquest alone, but of the fragile balance between power and pleasure, empire and intimacy, the grandeur of an age and the shadows of its decline.